Australians are typically known for being friendly, hard-working people who enjoy the simple pleasures of life. Down-to-earth people who value mateship and giving everyone a fair go. But COVID-19 restrictions and mandates belled the cat on a sad reality, and that sad reality is that Australia has changed. The silence was deafening as thousands of Australians across the country, including teachers, healthcare professionals, police officers, all the way through to young people working at Woolworths, were forced out of their jobs for refusing to be injected with the COVID vaccine. There's nothing down to earth about firing people for not trusting government and pharmaceutical companies. Melbourne even had the most dubious distinction of becoming the world's most locked-down city at one point. Americans were shocked and disturbed by the footage that was coming out of Australia, footage of quarantine facilities, authoritarian medical bureaucrats, and police brutality against peaceful protesters. Simply put, parts of Australia simply became a police state. It didn't feel like the Australia that the soldiers who fought in the First and Second World Wars were fighting for.
This man who served his country, who doesn't have COVID, in a city where there are no active cases, was kept behind a metal fence from being able to honour the people who he knows who served his country.
Our chief health officers even encouraged us to report our neighbours to the police if we saw them engaging in behaviour that wasn't, remember this one, COVID safe.
Police are being flooded with calls every day as people flout vaccine, mask and check-in rules. A small minority insisting on causing a fuss, some going out of their way to do so.
GP clinics sometimes shut their doors to those who declined these injections, including children. How is it that this happened in the so-called lucky country? What happened to the spirit of the Aussie digger, the colonial explorer, the settler, the British statesman, or the Aussie larrikin? Those men who put their lives on the line for others, explored new territories, established colonies, and took pride in their nation. Well, in case you didn't get the memo, it turns out they were all sexists and racists, and their patriarchal and colonial values were harmful to the soy boys and the Australian political and bureaucratic classes. Men having common sense and showing any degree of assertiveness is now a triggering display of toxic masculinity.
Father to son, it's what we've always done, to let the best of men to get.
Because the boys watching today will be the men of tomorrow.
Well, how do we get to this point? It's a complicated story, but a simple explanation is that our Judeo-Christian principles, which upheld our morality, our local communities, our philosophy, and the family, have simply been eroded over time. In some sense, this was triggered by the sexual and cultural revolution of the 1960s, because this sparked a decline that's now reached its apex at a point where people are unable to define what is a woman.
We should take that on notice.
You're going to take on notice the question of what a woman is.
No, well, there are a variety. It's a very contested space at the moment, Senator.
It's not just a woman who's born a woman. Australians are now having less children, marriage rates are declining, divorces are increasing, and more people are growing up in broken homes. Social justice ideology, complete with critical race theory and climate alarmism, along with the nihilism of social media, is now filling the void that our traditional Judeo-Christian ethos once did. It's ruining our young people's lives, and if we're being totally honest, we're simply not the same happy-go-lucky country we used to be. Furthermore, our education system is focusing on socially conditioning our children into becoming gender-confused left-wing activists rather than educating children so that they have fulfilling and meaningful lives. Nothing is left untouched by the poison of so-called progressivism. Something that once, in fact, united Australians is sport. And it's often said that we're a sporting nation because we've always celebrated our sporting heroes. They displayed qualities of excellence, being down to earth and embracing mateship, all of the things that I mentioned before. But unfortunately, sport has become, shall we say, more colourful. It's also too bad if you happen to be a woman in sport who doesn't want to compete against men. These days, if an athlete refuses to wear a rainbow armband or any other symbol on their Guernsey, they get cancelled because holding traditional views is apparently intolerant. If being a woke political ally is mandatory, then we don't live in a free country. It's as simple as that. Australians have become complacent with being told what to do by corporate and bureaucratic elites and with big government in general. We've now drifted into the authoritarianism of the therapeutic state, which enforces draconian rules for your safety. And whether that's about COVID or some other issue, It's designed not to protect you, but to disempower you. Now, perhaps it's our convict heritage. From our beginnings as a nation, the Commonwealth played a large role in funding and facilitating public services. However, Australia is a nation built on Judeo-Christian principles, and these traditional values are now under attack. And if we're being truthful, they've been under attack for some considerable time. It's these values that keep us free. The result of this erosion is bigger government and the moral decline of our nation, which makes us more susceptible to being exploited. The new religion is wokeness. Which do you prefer?
Climate change and its consequences can exacerbate the risk of sexual and gender-based violence.
Well, I'm proud to say that I've been a part of the so-called small minority insisting on causing a fuss, and I'm going to keep doing so because, as I've said many times before, we're now less free in this country today than we were a few years ago, and I'll always fight for your freedoms and for the genuine good of this nation because, to me, that's what the Aussie spirit is all about.